It's set in Los Angeles, and it depicts a society that's falling apart with racial tension. There's violence on the streets, there's burning cars, there's stores being looted. There's just an atmosphere of oppression and high tension in the air. Well, it's an optimistic film, ultimately. It looks at these problems, says there are these, it suggests, basically it's a thriller, it's a film noir thriller, but the background is this racial tension that is imagined or anticipated to be happening 6 years from now. But it's an optimistic film in the sense that it hopes and indicates that there will be potential harmony at some point. The only hope for us as a society in the next millennium is if we pull ourselves together and try and create some kind of social, racial, economic harmony for everyone. He's called Lenny Nero, and he is a hustler. He sells an illegal form of, if you like, visual narcotic. The premise of the movie is that in 6 years' time you'll be able to record what you see, what you experience off your cerebral cortex onto a little disc. And you can sell that disc, and someone else can play back your experience and relive it as you lived it. Anonymously, a tape is given to him of a horrific murder of a young prostitute. So it's a very sickening and disturbing thing that he witnesses. So he's kind of fired to find out what happened. And his senses tell him that if this person knows faith, then faith possibly is involved in the whole thing. There's some very dark intrigue going on to Lenny's senses, and he wants to find out and pursue it. And Mace reluctantly gets involved in it with him. Faith is this young prostitute he discovered on the streets when he was in the police force, and we hear in the script he indicates that he took her on, he fell in love with her, he pitied her, he saw in her something special, and she had this amazing kind of angry but incredibly energized and awakening singing voice, which sort of grabs you by the lapels and shakes you. And he was inspired by her and wanted to sort of rescue her from this sort of dark pit that she was in.
Strange Days takes place in the year 2000, the new millennium, and I feel in shooting it just looks like a state of emergency. You know, there are armed guards, police on the streets, total riot gear, and that's day to day. There's nothing special as it would be today, you know, as we've seen maybe in Los Angeles during the riots or whatever, and when there was the curfew, etc. going on. This is the day-to-day business as usual. At its core, I think the movie is, wake up, we're each other's most precious commodity. We're each other's most precious possession. We're each other. You know, so let's just wake up before it's just a little too late. You know, the most precious resource that we have is each other. You know, not the car, not the house, not the money, not the, you know, not the education, not all that adds to you and I being the most precious resource for each other. She gets frustrated with him. He's involved in things that she doesn't understand, that she wants to remain ignorant of or innocent to, you know, but she still loves him and she still sees the good that's in him.
I don't think there's any movie that I've seen or that's come out recently that compares to this movie. It's completely something I've never seen before. And it comes from the mind of James Cameron and with Kathryn Bigelow directing it. So it's going to be a masterpiece.
People are kind of hurtling towards the millennium, and they're not sure what they want anymore. You know, what makes them happy. You know, what the new kick is. It's kind of a, you know, postmodernist, nihilistic world. Max is Lenny's link to his past life, to police officers, law and order. You know, maybe some kind of cohesion in his life. Even though Max seems totally not cohesive. he is Lenny's link to it, because he still kind of works in that world. He's a bodyguard now for a big-time music producer and his new act, who's Juliette Lewis and Michael Wincott. So he still is in law enforcement on some level. And, you know, Max is a tough guy. I think Lenny respects him, and they were best friends, and he is his kind of link to his past, although Lenny has, you know, taken a very, you know, left turn in his life.
I had an unequivocal reaction to it. It was a tremendous piece that offered so many opportunities, that, you know, you had not only something that was very accessible and explosive in its underlying framework, but you had something that had so much tenderness and vulnerability and character development, which is a great juxtaposition. We, meaning we in the audience, are actually watching and or experiencing a breaking and entering of a robbery, a breaking and entering of a restaurant, and then having to escape the cops which come and try to break up this robbery. And in the course of this, it's a mad flight for your life. There was no existing equipment that would have enabled us to do it. It was too heavy, too cumbersome, didn't have the right. I wanted something that had a certain kind of life to it, not as much life as handheld, and not as smooth and sort of languid as Steadicam. So we had to build a camera in order to replicate this sort of quick, fleeting simulation of one's vision. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, we had to install a huge crane and use a helmet camera. All the epic quality or effects of any production is really at the service of story and character. And so it all takes place in somebody's eyes or across somebody's face, or the delivery of a sentence, or the delivery of a single word. And that's finally where the magic of it rests. I certainly always imagined the year 2000 to be like decades away, and then suddenly you realize it's, you know, you're looking at something that is within, you know, it's 5 years, 4 years away. It's nothing, it's immediate, it's almost upon us. What does that mean? That's the turn of the millennium. The last time it happened, it was virtually, you know, we were just in the beginning of pre-recorded history. So, I don't know, it's something that, I mean, it seemed to be a pivotal time, and one that could have a lot of, I guess it could have a lot of ramifications, and it's a moment for reflection and a sense of where we're going, what, you know, what does the future hold, what, you know, where are we headed, what changes are we making, how, you know, how, you know, are we going to repeat the same mistakes?
You know, LA seems to be seems to inherently be a kind of a flashpoint culture because it is a mixture of so many racial and ethnic types, and it is such a high pressure environment. So we see a lot of problems here first, and we're right here with the media, so they become globalized very quickly. I think that LA was really a good choice for a movie that's sort of about the apocalypse, you know, sort of about what the millennium could mean. From my standpoint as a writer, it's probably the most interesting film that I've done because it's so different from everything else. And you know, I'm very proud of what Kathryn did with the picture, because she went so far beyond what I wrote in creating something that's so, you know, visually and emotionally compelling. There are always inherent dangers whenever things move very rapidly and where social change takes place very quickly, and we're not necessarily capable of figuring out all the ramifications before we do something. We just sort of jump in blindly. It's a market-driven thing, you know. It goes immediately from the lab to the consumer practically these days. So yeah, I mean, I think come back in 20 years and we'll know what the dangers are for this sort of thing. But the history of in human technological development is we just do it, and then we find out what the consequences are. I think it's very safe to say that Strange Days is cautionary. It's basically saying, look, you know, if we don't do something about it, if we don't change ourselves in some way, and it doesn't take much, we're going to wind up living in this world, or a world very much like this.